Rancher saved a girl from hanging. Cut the rope just at the last second. Cowboy love stories. The wind whispered softly through the tall grass, carrying with it the scent of earth and the faint, lingering smell of cattle that grazed nearby. In the heart of this serene landscape, a rancher named Eli Thompson moved steadily among his horses and cattle. His life was simple, quiet, and predictable, shaped by long days of hard work and a deep connection with the land he called home. Eli was a man of modest means, with a sturdy build, calloused hands, and a kind, thoughtful face. His eyes, a soft shade of brown, reflected a life lived with honesty and integrity, a life guided by principles rather than fortune. Eli had always been known in his small town as a man of courage and fairness. People respected him not just for his skills as a rancher, but for his unwavering moral compass. He was the kind of man who would never turn a blind eye when someone was in trouble. For years, he had quietly helped neighbors during harsh winters, patched fences for those who could not afford it, and offered his experience to anyone who sought it. Though he preferred the solitude of the plains, he was not detached from the world around him. He understood the bonds of community and the delicate balance that kept the small town thriving. On this particular morning, as Eli moved among his herd, he noticed a few men from the town riding toward him in a hurry. Their expressions were tense, and their horses seemed as restless as they were. Eli's brow furrowed as he approached them. The men pulled up alongside him, the gravel crunching under their hooves, and one of them, a tall, wiry man named Sheriff Dalton, spoke in a voice that trembled with urgency. "Eli, you need to come quick," he said. "It's Clara Bennett. The townsfolk, they're planning to hang her." Eli's heart skipped a beat. Clara Bennett was a young girl, only 16, with gentle features and a quiet demeanor. She had lived in the town all her life, known for her shyness and kindness. The thought of harm coming to her was unbearable. He felt a surge of determination. He had to act and fast. "Hang her? For what?" Eli asked, his voice firm but laced with concern. "Some claim she stole from Mr. Harding's store," Dalton replied, his eyes shifting nervously. "The people are angry, Eli. They think they're delivering justice, but it's gone too far already. She's tied up and the mob, they're ready to act." Eli tightened his grip on the reins of his horse. The news struck him like a sudden storm. Injustice had always troubled him, but this was different. A child, barely more than a girl, was about to be harmed by fear and rumor. The thought of standing idle was impossible. Without hesitation, Eli spurred his horse into motion, galloping across the dusty plains toward the town. The wind whipped against his face, and his heart pounded not from the exertion but from the urgency of the situation. As he rode, memories of Clara filled his mind. She had once helped him when a calf had been injured, showing patience and care far beyond her years. She had a gentle spirit, and he knew, without doubt, that she was incapable of the crime she had been accused of. The ride to town seemed endless. The plains stretched out before him, the horizon blurring in the morning light. Dust rose from his horse's hooves, and the sound of hooves echoed like a drumbeat of determination. Every second mattered, and Eli pushed himself harder, feeling the weight of responsibility settle firmly on his shoulders. When he finally reached the outskirts of the town, the scene that met his eyes was chaotic. A crowd had gathered around a wooden scaffold in the center of the dusty main street. Faces twisted with anger and anticipation, men and women alike fueled by fear and gossip, were murmuring among themselves. The rope hung ominously from the scaffold, swaying slightly in the breeze, and at its end was Clara Bennett, tied and trembling. Her eyes were wide with terror, and her small body shook with every passing second. Eli felt a pang of fear, not for himself but for her. He could see the rope pressing against her neck, and the tension in the crowd made it clear that the situation could turn deadly at any moment. Yet, amidst the fear, he noticed hesitation in some of the townsfolk. Their anger, once so fierce, seemed to waver as they glanced at Clara's innocent face. Eli knew he had a chance, however slim, to save her. He dismounted his horse with practiced ease, keeping his movements calm and deliberate. The crowd parted slightly, giving him space, though the tension in the air remained thick. Eli's voice, strong and commanding yet filled with concern, rang out across the street. "Stop this madness," he shouted. "This girl does not deserve this. None of us have the right to take justice into our own hands." The words cut through the murmur of the crowd, and for a moment silence fell. All eyes turned toward him. Eli stepped closer, scanning the faces of the people he had known all his life. He saw fear, doubt, and a hint of shame reflected back at him. "Look at her," he continued, gesturing to Clara. "She is a child. She deserves protection, not punishment. We must not let rumors and fear decide her fate." A few of the older townsfolk began to murmur in agreement. Eli pressed on, carefully choosing his words. He spoke not with anger but with reason, appealing to the better nature of the people he knew so well. He reminded them of their own children, their families, and the values that had kept the town together for generations. Meanwhile, Clara's eyes were fixed on Eli. Though she was terrified, a small flicker of hope ignited within her. The sound of his voice, steady and determined, was a lifeline amidst the chaos. She could see the resolve in his eyes and knew that he would not let harm come to her if he could prevent it. Eli slowly moved closer to the scaffold, keeping his hands visible and his movements careful. He assessed the rope, noting its frayed texture and the way it had been hastily secured. Time was slipping away, and he needed to act quickly. Every second counted, and he could feel the tension mounting in the air. The crowd was still, watching him, waiting to see what he would do. He spoke again, this time directing his words to the mob. "Think about what you are doing. Is this justice or is it fear and anger? We are better than this. We cannot let our fear control us. We must act with wisdom, with mercy, and with truth." Slowly, he saw the shift he had hoped for. Some of the townsfolk lowered their heads, ashamed of the role they were about to play. Their anger began to fade, replaced by uncertainty and doubt. Eli seized the moment. He moved even closer, carefully positioning himself between Clara and the crowd, ready to protect her. Clara's breathing was shallow, her small frame tense with fear. Yet in that moment she felt a glimmer of safety. Eli's presence, his unwavering courage, and the sound of his voice gave her hope. She clung to that hope, knowing that she was not alone. Eli could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The next few minutes could decide life or death. He focused all his energy on remaining calm, on speaking reason to the crowd, and on finding the perfect moment to act. Every detail mattered: the position of the rope, the movements of the people, the shifting expressions on their faces. He knew that hesitation could cost Clara her life. As the crowd wavered, Eli prepared himself for the crucial moment. He took a deep breath, steadying his nerves and centering his focus. He had faced many challenges in his life, but nothing compared to this. Saving a young life from the brink of death required courage, precision, and an unwavering belief in doing what was right. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the street, and the wind stirred gently through the buildings. Eli's heart pounded, not with fear for himself, but with the urgency of protecting Clara. He could see her small hands trembling, her eyes wide and pleading. The sight fueled his determination. With every word he spoke and every step he took, Eli was preparing for the moment when he would need to act decisively. The town, the crowd, and the tense atmosphere all seemed to fade around him. All that mattered was Clara, her life hanging by a thin, frayed rope, and the knowledge that he could make a difference. This was a test of courage, not just for him, but for the entire town. Eli understood that the choices made in the next few moments would leave a lasting mark. It was a chance to teach others about justice, mercy, and humanity. And for Clara, it was a chance at life, hope, and a future yet to be written. Eli adjusted his stance, ready to act. He knew that timing, precision, and courage were everything. The crowd's murmurs grew quieter, and Clara's fearful gaze remained fixed on him. In that moment, Eli felt the immense weight of responsibility, but also the strength of purpose that comes from doing what is right. He whispered to himself, steadying his nerves, "Hold on, Clara. I've got you." And in that fragile, tense moment, the stage was set for an act of heroism that would become a story remembered for generations. Eli Thompson's horse galloped across the dusty plains, hooves kicking up small clouds of dirt that drifted in the morning sunlight. Every second felt like a lifetime as he urged his horse forward, his eyes fixed on the small town in the distance. The wind whipped through his hair, carrying the smell of dry grass and the faint scent of smoke from nearby chimneys. His heart pounded, but not from exhaustion. He was racing against time to save a life, and every second mattered. As Eli approached the outskirts of town, the sounds of the bustling morning market reached him. The clatter of wagon wheels, the lowing of cattle, and the occasional shout of merchants calling out their prices. But beneath all this ordinary noise there was something else, something that made his stomach tighten. A faint murmur of anger, sharp and tense, carried over the sounds of daily life. It was the murmur of a crowd gathered in anticipation, their voices filled with judgment and fear. Eli slowed his horse slightly, scanning the streets. He saw the scaffold in the center of the town square, a simple wooden structure that now seemed menacing. The rope swayed in the breeze, and beneath it a small figure trembled. It was Clara Bennett. She was tied by the wrists, her hands chafed by the rough rope, and her eyes wide with terror. Eli's chest tightened. She looked so small, so fragile, and yet the crowd seemed ready to treat her as though she were a criminal deserving of the harshest punishment. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the rush of adrenaline that surged through him. He had faced challenges before, storms on the plains, runaway cattle, and even the occasional dangerous animal, but nothing had felt as urgent as this moment. Clara's life depended entirely on him. He could not afford hesitation or doubt. The crowd parted slightly as he approached, sensing the authority in his stride. Eli dismounted his horse carefully, keeping his movements slow and deliberate to avoid alarming anyone, or Clara. He could see the tension in the faces around him, the mixture of anger, fear, and uncertainty. The mob's energy was volatile. One wrong move could set them off completely. Eli spoke, his voice carrying across the square. "Everyone listen. Stop this madness. You are about to take the life of a young girl who has done nothing to deserve this." The murmurs faltered. Some of the townspeople shifted uneasily, glancing at one another. They had been swept up in anger, but Eli's voice introduced doubt, and doubt could unravel even the most heated crowd. He took another step closer to the scaffold, keeping his eyes on Clara to make sure she knew he was there to protect her. Clara's breathing was quick and shallow. Her small body trembled with fear, and tears welled in her eyes. But when she saw Eli approaching, a flicker of hope ignited inside her. She had heard stories of Eli's courage and kindness before, but now she needed to see it for herself. She needed someone to act, and that someone was him. Eli scanned the rope and the scaffold, noting the frayed knots and the way the rope had been hastily secured. The mob was growing impatient, and the tension in the air thickened. He knew that if he didn't act soon, the situation could spiral out of control. Every second counted. He turned his attention back to the crowd. "Think about what you're doing," he shouted. "Is this justice, or is it fear talking? This girl is barely more than a child. None of us have the right to decide her fate based on rumors or suspicion." Some of the townspeople looked down at the ground, ashamed. Others whispered to one another, uncertainty creeping into their voices. Eli sensed that the moment to act was drawing near. He could see the rope tightening slightly, the hands of some men pulling it taut as if impatient to carry out the sentence. Time was slipping away, and he had to move quickly but carefully. Eli spoke again, his tone calm but firm. "We are a community. We are supposed to protect one another, not let fear and gossip decide who lives and who dies. This is not how justice works." His words seemed to have an effect. A few of the older men in the crowd nodded slightly, their anger replaced by a sense of responsibility. Others hesitated, unsure of what to do next. Eli could feel the shift, but he knew it was fragile. One wrong word, one sudden movement, and the fragile order could collapse. Meanwhile, Clara's eyes remained fixed on him. She was trembling, her face pale and streaked with tears, but the sight of Eli gave her courage. She had been alone and terrified moments ago, but now she could see someone who would fight for her. That small spark of hope gave her strength to hold on, to endure the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. Eli took another careful step forward, assessing the rope and the scaffold once more. He could see that the knots were not secure and that with careful action he could free her before it was too late. But he also knew that timing was critical. If he moved too quickly, the mob might panic. If he waited too long, Clara's life could be lost. He whispered to himself, steadying his nerves. "Hold on, Clara, I'm coming. Just a little longer." The crowd's tension increased as a few impatient individuals began to murmur, suggesting that it was time to carry out the punishment. Eli's eyes narrowed as he realized that the danger was immediate. He needed to act before anyone made a fatal mistake. With careful precision, he edged closer to the scaffold, keeping his hands visible and his movements deliberate. He continued to speak to the crowd, not with anger but with reason and authority. "Stop. This is wrong. Do you want to live in a town where fear and suspicion can end a young girl's life? Is that the kind of place we want to be?" The words seemed to sink in. The murmur of the crowd softened, and some individuals began to step back, uncertain of what to do. Eli could see that he had reached a moment of opportunity. With the mob's attention divided and their anger tempered by doubt, he had a chance to save Clara. He glanced at her again. She was trembling violently now, her small frame shaking with fear. He could see the desperation in her eyes, the silent plea for help. It fueled his resolve. He could not fail her, not now, not ever. Eli assessed the rope once more. The knot was old and frayed, and the rope had been looped around the post with a rough, hurried hand. With careful, deliberate movements, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his small, sharp knife. Every motion had to be perfect. One wrong move could tighten the rope further or alert the crowd, causing panic. He took a deep breath, centering himself. His eyes met Clara's and he gave her a small, reassuring nod. It was a silent promise. "I won't let anything happen to you." The crowd watched, holding its collective breath. Some whispered to one another while others still gripped the rope tightly, unaware of how precarious their actions had become. Eli moved slowly, his voice calm and steady. "Everyone, stand back. I can fix this. Trust me. Let me handle it." As he positioned himself, he could feel the eyes of the townsfolk upon him. Their anger had not disappeared entirely, but the uncertainty in their expressions gave him a slight advantage. The rope creaked under tension, Clara's small body swaying slightly as she fought to keep her balance. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves of nearby trees and adding to the tension in the air. Eli's hands were steady as he reached for the rope, his knife ready. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through him, heightening his senses. Every sound, every movement, every heartbeat was magnified. He knew that the next few moments would determine whether Clara lived or died. The crowd leaned forward, sensing the tension. Some began to murmur words of caution, while others held their breath in anticipation. Clara's eyes never left Eli, and in that gaze he could see her hope, fear, and trust all at once. It was a heavy responsibility, but one he was ready to bear. Eli whispered to himself again, steadying his hands. "Just a little closer, hold on, Clara, almost there." He adjusted his position, careful not to alert the crowd to his plan. Every movement was measured, deliberate, and precise. He knew that if he acted too quickly, it could provoke the mob. If he hesitated, Clara's life could be lost. Timing, precision, and courage were everything. The rope creaked again, and Clara's breathing quickened. Eli could feel the tension in the air, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Yet he remained focused, drawing on every ounce of skill, courage, and determination he had learned over years of hard work on the plains. He whispered softly to Clara, his voice carrying over the distance just enough for her to hear. "Hold on, I've got you. You're safe now." Clara clung to that promise, her small hands gripping the rope as best she could. Hope replaced fear, even if only slightly. She knew that someone was fighting for her life, and that knowledge gave her the strength to endure. Eli took a final deep breath, preparing for the decisive moment. The crowd's murmurs had softened, the tension reaching a peak, and Clara's fate hung in the balance. Every second, every heartbeat, every movement mattered. Eli knew that in a matter of moments, everything could change. He adjusted his knife, positioning himself to act with precision. The rope swayed slightly in the breeze, the scaffold looming above, and Clara's small body trembled with fear. Eli's eyes met hers one last time before he made his move, a silent promise of protection and courage. The morning air was thick with tension. Every sound seemed sharper, the creak of the scaffold, the whispering wind, the murmur of the anxious crowd. Clara Bennett hung in the center of the town square, her small body trembling as the rope pressed harshly against her neck. Her eyes, wide with terror, scanned the crowd, but no one dared move forward. All attention was focused on her, and the weight of judgment and fear seemed to hang heavier than the rope itself. Eli Thompson had carefully moved into position. His hands were steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. His eyes were locked on Clara, assessing every detail of the frayed rope and the knots that held her captive. He could see the tension in the crowd beginning to waver, the angry whispers fading, replaced by uncertain glances. Some townsfolk had begun to realize that perhaps their anger had carried them too far. Clara's small hands gripped the rope desperately, trying to steady herself. Every sway made her fear spike. Every creak of the wooden scaffold sent chills down her spine. She was acutely aware of the danger, yet a small glimmer of hope had taken root when she saw Eli step forward. She knew, somehow, that he would not let her die. That belief gave her the strength to hold on, even as the world seemed to tilt around her. Eli spoke again, his voice calm but firm, carrying over the square. "Everyone back. This girl is not guilty of what you accuse her of. She deserves mercy, not punishment. Step away and watch justice be done the right way." Some in the crowd hesitated. A few lowered their hands from the rope, unsure if continuing was right. But the rope was still taut, and every passing second brought the danger closer. Eli knew he had to act, and there was no room for hesitation. He took a careful step forward, knife in hand, and studied the knot. It was tied roughly, not professionally, which was fortunate. It meant that with skill and precision he could cut the rope without causing it to tighten further. His heart pounded, not from fear for himself, but from the urgency of saving Clara's life. He could hear her shallow, panicked breaths, and each one spurred him into action. Eli whispered under his breath, more to himself than to anyone else. "Almost there, hold on, Clara. I've got you, just a little longer." The crowd watched, holding their breath. Some murmured among themselves, unsure of what to do. The tension in the air was so thick that it seemed to press against Eli's chest. Yet he remained calm, steady, and deliberate. Every movement was measured, every word chosen carefully. This was not just about saving Clara. It was about preventing the crowd from spiraling further into fear and chaos. He inched closer to the rope. The knife glinted in the sunlight, a small but powerful symbol of hope in the midst of fear. Eli's eyes locked onto the knot. He took a deep breath, feeling the cool morning air fill his lungs, and then he made his move. With precision and speed, he positioned the knife at the frayed edge of the rope. His hand was steady, his mind focused entirely on the task at hand. Clara's wide eyes followed his movements, fear mingling with anticipation. She understood instinctively that this moment would decide her fate. Eli's knife sliced through the rope cleanly. For a heartbeat, there was only silence, the kind of silence that makes every nerve tingle and every heartbeat seem amplified. Then, almost immediately, Clara's body dropped safely to the ground, her small feet landing with a soft thud. She gasped, her trembling subsiding slightly as relief washed over her. The crowd erupted into murmurs, a mixture of shock, awe, and disbelief. No one had expected Eli to act so swiftly or skillfully. The rope, once a symbol of terror, now lay broken, useless, and harmless. Clara scrambled slightly, still shaking, and looked up at Eli with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. Eli knelt beside her, gently guiding her away from the scaffold. "It's okay now, Clara," he said softly. "You're safe. I've got you." Tears streamed down Clara's cheeks, but they were no longer only tears of fear. They were tears of relief, gratitude, and the overwhelming realization that she had been saved. Her hands shook as she clutched Eli's arm for support, and he held her steady, ensuring that she would not fall or panic further. The crowd continued to murmur, some stepping back in shame. The angry energy that had gripped them earlier had dissipated, replaced by confusion and awe. They had witnessed a single act of courage change the course of an entire situation, and it left them reeling. Eli's bravery had not only saved a life, but had also reminded the town of the importance of justice and humanity. Eli scanned the crowd, his eyes sharp. Though Clara was safe for the moment, he knew he could not let the situation escalate again. He needed to calm the people and ensure that no further rash actions would be taken. "Step back," he commanded, his voice firm. "This girl is safe. She does not deserve harm. Those of you who sought to punish her have gone too far. Remember this moment and remember the lesson it teaches us. Fear and anger cannot be allowed to dictate our actions." Some townsfolk nodded quietly, shamefaced and thoughtful. Others still whispered, but their voices were no longer loud enough to cause panic. The tide had turned and Eli had regained control of the situation. Clara, still trembling, found her voice and spoke softly. Thank you so much," she said, her words choked with emotion. Eli placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're welcome, Clara." "You're safe now," he said gently. "We'll get you home. Everything will be okay." With careful steps, Eli led Clara away from the scaffold, keeping her close and shielding her from the crowd. She clung to him, finding comfort in his presence, knowing that he had risked his own safety to protect her. The fear that had gripped her moments ago was slowly being replaced by relief and gratitude. As they moved through the square, Eli could feel the tension in the crowd gradually easing. People whispered among themselves, realizing the enormity of what had just happened. They had almost committed a terrible mistake, and now, thanks to Eli, they had been spared the guilt of ending an innocent life. Clara's small hand trembled as she held onto Eli's arm. Her eyes, still wide from the shock, were filled with trust. She had seen courage in its purest form, and it had saved her life. Eli could feel the weight of that trust and knew he had to honor it, not just now, but for as long as she needed him. Eli glanced back at the scaffold. The rope hung uselessly from the post, a stark reminder of how quickly fear and anger could push people to act without thinking. He made a mental note of the lesson the town needed to learn. Courage and reason must always outweigh fear and impulse. "Clara, we need to get you somewhere safe," Eli said softly, guiding her toward his horse. "We'll make sure you get home, and then we'll figure out the rest." Clara nodded, her small frame leaning against him for support. The relief was palpable, but she still trembled from the adrenaline and fear that had gripped her. Eli helped her onto his horse, careful to make sure she was secure before mounting himself. Together, they rode away from the square, leaving behind the scaffold and the broken rope. As they rode, Eli kept a watchful eye on the town, ensuring that no one followed or tried to create more trouble. Clara's breathing gradually steadied, and she began to speak softly, recounting the moments leading up to the hanging. Eli listened carefully, understanding the fear, confusion, and helplessness she had endured. You, you came just in time, Clara said, her voice trembling. I didn't think anyone would help me. Eli gave her a reassuring smile. I promised I would, and I meant it. You didn't deserve this, Clara. No one does. The ride back toward safety was quiet, filled with a sense of relief and the realization of how close Clara had come to tragedy. Yet, despite the danger they had faced, there was a small spark of hope, hope that the town could learn from this, and hope that Clara could find peace and security once again. Eli guided her to a safe location, a small cabin on the outskirts of town where she could rest and recover. He made sure she was comfortable, providing water and blankets, and stayed by her side to ensure she felt protected. Clara's tears began to subside, replaced by a sense of safety that only came from knowing someone truly cared for her well-being. For Eli, the moment was both triumphant and sobering. He had saved a life, yes, but he also understood the responsibility that came with it. Clara's trust in him was absolute, and he had to honor that trust. He resolved to ensure her safety and to help the town see the error of their ways. That morning, the town would remember the courage of a single rancher who had acted with bravery and precision to save a young girl from a terrible fate. But for Clara, it would be a personal, life-changing moment, a day when fear had been met with courage, and life had been saved by someone willing to risk everything for justice and mercy. Eli sat beside her that night, watching as she finally relaxed in the warmth and safety of the cabin. The tension of the day slowly faded, replaced by a sense of gratitude and reflection. Both knew that the events of the morning would leave a lasting mark on their lives, shaping their relationship and teaching lessons about courage, trust, and the power of standing up for what is right. After the harrowing events in the town square, a quiet tension settled over the small community. The morning sun had climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the dusty streets, but the warmth of daylight could not immediately wash away the chill left by what had almost happened. People moved slowly, heads bowed in shame or uncertainty, whispering to each other about the events that had unfolded. Some could not meet the eyes of their neighbors, others muttered apologies under their breath, and a few simply stood frozen, trying to comprehend the brush with tragedy they had all witnessed. Eli Thompson remained vigilant, guiding Clara Bennett to a safe space away from the town's gaze. Though the immediate danger was over, the aftershocks of fear and guilt were everywhere. Clara's hands were still shaking slightly, her voice soft as she whispered thanks repeatedly to Eli. Each word carried a mixture of relief and lingering terror. Eli listened patiently, reassuring her, making sure she understood that she was now safe and that the nightmare she had faced would not define her. The cabin to which Eli brought Clara was modest, surrounded by a few acres of open land where the wind could blow freely and the quiet offered solace. Inside, the wooden walls were plain but sturdy, and the fireplace, though unlit at the moment, promised warmth and safety. Eli made her sit by the window, letting her gaze wander across the peaceful landscape beyond, a stark contrast to the chaos she had just endured. He fetched water, a clean cloth, and a small blanket, attending to her with careful, deliberate movements. Clara sat quietly, her hands clasped together in her lap as she watched Eli work. Though she was exhausted, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The fear that had gripped her earlier in the day had not entirely disappeared, but now it was tempered by the reassurance of Eli's presence. She knew, instinctively, that he would not leave her side until she was safe. Meanwhile, back in town, the people were beginning to process what had happened. The scaffold stood as a stark reminder of how close they had come to committing a terrible act. Those who had been part of the mob could not ignore the bravery of Eli Thompson, nor the innocence of Clara Bennett. Rumors and accusations that had once fueled anger were now replaced by quiet reflection. Parents whispered to their children about courage, neighbors debated the importance of justice over impulse, and a collective understanding began to emerge. Fear and anger, left unchecked, could lead to irreversible mistakes. In the days that followed, Eli remained close to Clara and her family. He helped ensure their safety and assisted with everyday chores, easing the burden on a family still shaken by the events. Clara's parents, overwhelmed with relief, expressed their deep gratitude repeatedly. They could not comprehend fully the bravery it had taken for Eli to act in that moment, but they understood the result. Their daughter was alive. Eli also took time to speak with the local authorities. Sheriff Dalton, though initially anxious and unsure, had witnessed Eli's decisive action firsthand. Together, they began to review the accusations against Clara, seeking the truth rather than relying on rumor and gossip. Through careful questioning and investigation, it became clear that Clara had been wrongly accused. The real circumstances surrounding the theft, small misunderstandings, miscommunications, and hasty judgments were slowly uncovered. Justice, tempered with care and diligence, was finally being restored. Clara's recovery, both emotional and physical, was gradual. The terror she had experienced left its mark, and Eli understood that her trust in people had been shaken. Yet step by step, she began to regain confidence. Simple acts, a walk in the open fields, tending to the small garden behind her house, or speaking with a trusted friend, helped her reconnect with the world outside the shadow of fear. Eli often accompanied her, offering guidance and support, and ensuring she felt safe at every turn. The bond between Eli and Clara grew stronger during this time. It was a bond not born of romance, but of trust, gratitude, and mutual respect. Clara had seen courage in action, and Eli had witnessed the resilience of a young girl who had faced unimaginable fear. Together, they navigated the delicate path of healing, understanding that some wounds were not visible but ran deep nonetheless. The townspeople, too, were learning important lessons. The story of Clara's near hanging spread quietly, first through whispers, then through conversations at local gatherings. Many reflected on their own actions and the power of collective emotion. They realized that standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult or unpopular, was a measure of true character. Eli's heroism became a symbol not only of bravery, but of moral clarity, inspiring others to reconsider how they treated their neighbors and responded to fear-driven impulses. As the days turned into weeks, the initial shock gave way to a quieter, more contemplative atmosphere in the town. Clara began to return to her usual routines, cautiously at first, but with growing confidence. She helped her family with chores, visited neighbors she trusted, and even smiled again, small and tentative at first, but genuine. Her life, though forever marked by the morning's events, was beginning to regain normalcy. Eli, meanwhile, continued his work on the ranch, but his role in Clara's life remained significant. He offered guidance, protection, and companionship. Through shared work and conversation, a sense of calm and stability returned to Clara. She learned from Eli's patience and steadfastness, understanding that courage was not just about daring acts, but also about consistency, reliability, and integrity. The event also brought the community closer together in subtle ways. People began to communicate more openly, to question their assumptions, and to support one another more earnestly. Parents spoke to their children about justice and empathy, neighbors checked in on each other, and the town gradually began to heal. The incident became a reminder of how easily fear could escalate and how essential it was to act with thoughtfulness and compassion. Clara's parents were deeply affected by the experience. They had always known that life on the plains could be harsh and unpredictable, but this had brought them face to face with the fragility of human judgment. They were grateful to Eli not just for saving their daughter, but for restoring their faith in the community's ability to learn, grow, and correct its mistakes. In quieter moments, Clara and Eli often sat together, speaking softly about the events and the lessons they had learned. Clara would sometimes ask questions about courage, about what it meant to stand up when others did not, and Eli would answer thoughtfully, explaining that true bravery was measured not by the absence of fear, but by the decision to act rightly despite it. These conversations nurtured a deeper understanding between them. Clara's fear slowly transformed into respect and admiration, while Eli's concern for her safety blossomed into a sense of protective care. Their relationship, built on trust and shared experience, became a foundation of emotional strength for both of them. The town, too, began to see changes. People who had participated in the mob were quietly reflecting on their actions. Apologies were offered, and the sense of shame gradually transformed into a commitment to act differently in the future. Conversations about fairness, justice, and the consequences of rash decisions became more common, influencing the way the community approached conflicts and disagreements. Eli's reputation as a man of integrity and courage was solidified. He did not seek praise, but it found him nonetheless. Neighbors and townsfolk spoke of him with admiration, not for show or glory, but as an example of what it meant to act with wisdom, courage, and heart. His actions had not only saved a life but had inspired a town to reflect and grow. Clara, now able to smile more freely, began to participate in small community activities, her confidence slowly returning. She helped with chores, assisted neighbors, and even visited the marketplace, her head held high. Though the memory of that terrifying morning would always remain, it no longer dominated her life. Instead, it became a story of survival, courage, and the kindness of a man who had risked everything to protect an innocent life. Through it all, Eli remained a steadfast presence in Clara's life. He provided guidance, protection, and reassurance, helping her rebuild not only her confidence but her faith in the goodness of people. Their bond deepened, a relationship forged in adversity, grounded in trust, respect, and a shared understanding of the fragility and value of life. As the weeks turned into months, Clara's life slowly regained a sense of normalcy. She continued her studies, assisted her family, and spent time outdoors, rediscovering the joy of simple pleasures. The fear that had once threatened to overwhelm her was replaced with resilience and gratitude, a transformation made possible by Eli's timely intervention and unwavering support. Eli, in turn, reflected on the events with a quiet sense of satisfaction. He had acted not out of desire for recognition, but out of a commitment to what was right. In saving Clara, he had reaffirmed his own values and demonstrated the power of courage, empathy, and moral conviction. His actions left an indelible mark, not only on Clara's life but on the broader community. The town, once rattled by fear and anger, began to heal. Its people had learned a profound lesson about the consequences of rash judgment and the importance of standing up for what is right. They came to understand that true justice required patience, reflection, and courage, qualities Eli had embodied in the most critical moments. Through these experiences, both Clara and the town emerged stronger. Clara had faced fear and survived, learning about resilience, courage, and the value of trust. The town had witnessed bravery and learned to temper anger with reason. And Eli Thompson had shown, through his actions, that one person's courage could change the course of many lives. Months had passed since that fateful morning in the town square, when Eli Thompson had saved Clara Bennett from the hanging that nearly ended her life. The memory of that day, though still vivid in their minds, had gradually transformed from one of terror into one of hope, courage, and the beginning of something extraordinary. Clara had grown stronger, more confident and determined to reclaim her life. She moved with a sense of purpose now, a quiet strength that had not been present before. Her experiences had shaped her, but they had not broken her. Eli remained a constant presence in Clara's life, offering guidance, protection, and companionship. Their relationship had evolved naturally, rooted in trust and mutual respect. It was not a sudden or dramatic romance, but a deep and enduring bond that grew from shared experience and understanding. Clara admired Eli not only for his bravery, but also for his unwavering integrity, while Eli found himself drawn to Clara's resilience, kindness, and gentle spirit. The bond between them became a source of comfort and strength, a steady light in a world that could be unpredictable and harsh. Each morning, Eli would rise early to tend to the ranch. Clara, once hesitant to venture beyond her home, now accompanied him on the trails, learning the rhythms of ranch life. She helped with the cattle, tended to the horses, and even learned to ride with more confidence than she had ever imagined. Eli guided her patiently, offering encouragement and praise for every small accomplishment. Together, they worked the land, the open plains serving as both a classroom and a sanctuary. Evenings were spent by the fire, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet reflection. Clara would recount her experiences at home, Eli would offer advice, and together they would discuss the lessons learned from the events of that spring. The bond between them deepened with every conversation, every shared moment, and every act of care. It was in these small, everyday moments that their connection flourished, growing into something neither of them had expected but both had come to cherish. The townspeople, too, had begun to change. The story of Eli's bravery and Clara's near-death had spread quietly but steadily throughout the community. People spoke of courage, compassion, and the importance of standing up for what is right. They began to act with greater thoughtfulness, recognizing the impact of their words and actions. The incident had become a powerful lesson in empathy and justice, one that the town would not soon forget. Clara's family, once burdened by fear and uncertainty, now found a renewed sense of security and hope. They were grateful for Eli's intervention, but they also recognized the strength that Clara herself had shown. She had faced unimaginable fear, endured it, and emerged stronger. They encouraged her to embrace life fully, to explore her potential, and to allow herself to experience joy and happiness once more. Eli and Clara spent more time together outside of work as well. They would take long walks across the plains, observing the beauty of the land, the movement of the herds, and the changing seasons. These walks were filled with conversation, laughter, and the simple pleasure of being in each other's company. They shared dreams, hopes, and quiet reflections, forming a deeper understanding of one another. It was during these moments that the foundations of love began to take root, not rushed, not forced, but gentle and enduring. Clara began to realize the depth of her feelings for Eli. It was not just gratitude for saving her life, though that would always be a part of it. She admired his courage, his patience, and the unwavering support he had provided during her recovery. She felt safe with him, understood by him, and inspired by him. Her heart responded to his quiet strength, and slowly, without even realizing it, she found herself thinking of him constantly, hoping for his presence and valuing every shared moment. Eli, too, felt a shift in his own emotions. What had begun as concern and responsibility had grown into admiration and affection. He had always respected Clara's intelligence and resilience, but over time, he had come to recognize the depth of his feelings. He valued her presence, her laughter, and her spirit. He felt a protective instinct, yes, but also a desire to nurture, support, and share his life with her. It was a love that had been forged in adversity, strengthened by trust, and now blossoming into something more profound. The town began to notice the bond between them. There was no gossip, no scandal, only quiet admiration. People saw the care with which Eli treated Clara, the patience and encouragement he offered, and the joy that Clara now displayed. The story of their connection, born from life and death, had become a subtle inspiration to those around them, a reminder that courage, kindness, and trust could lead not only to survival, but to love. Clara's confidence continued to grow. She began to take on responsibilities in her family's household with renewed determination. She assisted neighbors, helped with community events, and even offered guidance to younger children who looked up to her. Eli watched her with pride, knowing that she had transformed from a frightened girl into a strong, capable young woman. Her growth was a testament to her resilience, and it deepened the admiration and affection he felt for her. As the seasons changed, Eli and Clara's bond strengthened further. They celebrated small victories, shared quiet evenings under the stars, and supported each other through the challenges of daily life. Their love was not dramatic or rushed, but steady, patient, and profound. It was a love built on trust, mutual respect, and the shared experience of having faced fear and survived. One spring morning, as the sun rose over the plains, Eli and Clara walked together along a familiar trail. The world around them was alive with color, the grass green and vibrant, the cattle grazing peacefully, and the sky painted with the soft hues of dawn. Clara looked at Eli, her eyes reflecting the warmth and gratitude she felt. "Eli," she said softly, "I don't know how to thank you enough for everything, for saving me, for being here, for everything." Eli smiled, placing a reassuring hand on hers. "You don't have to thank me, Clara. I did what I had to do. I would do it again if it meant keeping you safe. That's what matters." They walked in silence for a while, listening to the gentle rustling of the grass and the distant calls of the cattle. The quiet was comforting, a contrast to the chaos of the past. In that moment, the bond between them felt unbreakable, a connection forged through shared struggle and nurtured through care and trust. The town continued to heal as well. People reflected on the lessons of fear, courage, and justice. They treated one another with greater consideration, aware of the consequences of rash actions. The story of Clara's near hanging became part of the town's collective memory, a cautionary tale, but also a story of hope, bravery, and the power of one person to make a difference. Clara's family celebrated her newfound strength and confidence. They encouraged her to embrace life fully, to take risks, and to pursue happiness. They saw in her a young woman who had faced unimaginable fear and emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Eli's presence in her life was a source of stability and guidance, and their bond was recognized and respected by all who knew them. As months turned into years, Eli and Clara's relationship blossomed further. They shared their dreams, supported each other through challenges, and built a life together filled with respect, trust, and deep affection. Their love was not sudden or dramatic, but steady, enduring, and profound. It was a love that had grown from trust, courage, and the shared experience of surviving a life-threatening ordeal. Eventually, the town came to see Eli and Clara as symbols of hope and resilience. Their story was recounted not with fear but with admiration, for Eli's bravery, Clara's courage, and the love that had grown from their shared experience. They had shown that even in the darkest moments, humanity, kindness, and trust could prevail. In time, Eli and Clara began to plan a future together. They dreamed of a home filled with warmth, laughter, and the simple joys of life on the plains. Their love was steady, built on a foundation of trust, courage, and mutual respect. It was a love that had been tested by fear and adversity and had emerged stronger for it. As they stood together one evening, watching the sun set over the plains, Eli took Clara's hand in his. The sky was painted with colors that seemed to mirror the beauty of the life they had built together, golden, soft, and full of promise. Clara leaned against him, feeling safe, cherished, and loved. "We've come a long way," she said softly. "Yes," Eli replied, his voice calm and steady. "But this is just the beginning. Together we can face anything." Clara smiled, a smile full of warmth, gratitude, and love. She knew that the trials they had faced had shaped them, but they had not defined them. Instead, those challenges had brought them together, created a bond unbreakable by fear or circumstance. The story of Eli Thompson and Clara Bennett became one remembered not just for the dramatic rescue, but for the enduring love, trust, and courage that followed. It was a story of hope, demonstrating that even in the face of danger and fear, humanity could prevail and love could flourish. Together, they faced the future with strength, confidence, and the knowledge that they had each other. Their lives, once shadowed by fear and uncertainty, were now filled with promise, laughter, and the quiet joy of a love built on trust, courage, and the unbreakable bond of shared experience.